Welcome back, team. Today we're going to be going through both of my tier lists for the new patch that just dropped today, patch 2518. So I've created two of them this time. First of all, we have a high-low tier list for Masters Plus, so exclusively for the higher ranks. It does apply, a little bit to Diamond as well, with some variables, and we've got a lower rank tier list as well for below Emerald only. So we're going to be going through the placement of the champions, but also comparing them to one another to see why they just look so different. So starting with our high-low tier list on S tier, all these champions are just the three strongest in the game, but they kind of have different reasons. Jace is a big one. He just got buffed last patch. The 20 extra base damage on Q is pretty insane, to be honest, but in higher ranks a lot of people play around that. They utilize the creeps, they don't tank it very easily, which is why a lot of high rank Jaces actually start W in a bunch of different matchups. But the Q start is going to be a lot of bonus damage at level 2, level 3 as well, so definitely a notable buff. I'm not going to say he's going to be, the king, rank 1 champion in the game. I still think he's on a similar tier as the other three. They're not really placed in order at the moment. Now Jason and Bessa, they're just so solid. They're really good blind picks. It doesn't matter what's on your team, the enemy team. These champions have really high consistent value in games compared to another good champion like Darius, where if you verse a bunch of melees that run towards you, broken, unbeatable. If you verse a bunch of range, high mobility champions, your value is a lot lower. That's why he's not really on the same playing field as them, even though champs like Darius, champs like Fiora, even champs like Jax, they have higher highs than Jason and Ambessa. Their consistent value is a lot lower. Now, the exception to that kind of consistency rule is Riven. She does have some hard matchup spread, some matchups she doesn't like. She does have some comps that are quite annoying, bunch of disengage, bunch of poppies and broms and stuff she hates, of course. However, she just has so much carry potential, so good in skirmishing, spikes so hard 1 to 2 items, and you have that way to proxy, be impactful around jungle mid, so definitely an S tier solo queue champion as well. Now, for A tier. So, some champions I've moved up like Rumble, even though he got nerfed, a few patches back. I still think he's just so solid as a blind pick. Again, no real bad game for him. Spikes really hard 1 to 2 items as well. Just a really strong champion, really abuses mask stacking as to be strong in side lane as well. Not really as vulnerable as he used to be back in the day. Now Aurora. Aurora did get a nerf on this patch. However, I don't feel like it's going to change much of it. A big benefit to this champion is she's just completely broken in lane. She beats pretty much any melee champion, fine in tall range matchups. There's nothing unplayable for her. And the mask stacking build's really strong on her as well. They're trying to nerf it with the percent HP change, but I don't think that's going to be enough. I still think she's going to be a top 5 champion in top lane. So I'll go through the ones I've kind of moved around, the ones that are staying the same. I'm not going to touch on all of them. Champions like Rengar, I've been watching some really good Rengar plays recently, and it's just really opened my eyes how strong the champion actually is. The problem with him is, in my opinion, he's the hardest top lane champion in the game. Harder than Riven, harder than Gangplank, so definitely you just need thousands and thousands of games to make him work, but if you do have those, you do have that mastery, definitely a overpowered champion. Now, the rest of them, Cassiopeia did get a buff, that's pretty nice. It's pretty similar to Rengar. You can't just play Cassiopeia, you have to be a Cassio main, you have to have that Life of the Snake, you have to be born on that year because she's just a champion with such a high skill ceiling. I've never visited Cassiopeia, and I've thought this is a good champion, until I went to Korea, and there's just 2 or 3 of them that are just so good, that makes me, keep this champion rated so highly, and their buff is going to be very nice. A lot of casters go 2 points E as well. So you do get a little bit extra damage level 3, but especially that level 9 damage spike is going to be really, really high for all ins, where a lot of champions had a chance in the past to fight her, on their first item spike. This is going to make it a lot harder. Quinn's another champion I rate quite highly. Some really good Quinn 1 tricks this champion. It just has a lot of value in lane, and you can spread your lead around the map quite easily. It's a really good solo queue champion. You get prio quite consistently, and you can use that prio to spread your lead around the map and be impactful there. Really oppressive in side lane as well if she does get that lead in lane. Now, another champion, a notable one that I've promoted, is actually Gangplank. So before I felt like Gangplank was too weak of a blind pick, but with some of the tech, the Comet Gangplank and stuff like that, and just the meta kind of shifting away, a lot of champions getting nerfed, throughout the patch, patch after patch. I think he's just in a really good spot right now. I'm going to keep him low A tier for high elos. I think for lower ranks, he can be quite difficult to execute, so that's why he's not going to be that much higher in the lower ranks. Now, for B tier, some champions that got demoted, like Warwick, he just got a pretty big nerf on the, not this current patch, but the previous one, so that's why I had to move him down a little bit. I still think he's a playable champ. He was just a little bit too OP before, and now he's just pretty solid. I'd rate him pretty similarly to a champion like Renekton, where you have to get a lot of work done during that 1 to 2 item spike, but before it was just so oppressive, so stat checky, not real many options against him if he plays well. Now you do have a bit more room to outplay. And some other champions, like when she did just got too many nerfs patch after patch, I have to keep her around middle of the pack B tier. Still great in the right game. If you pick her into like Scion, Vi or something like that, you know, melee beefcakes and you get a free matchup, of course still a great champ, still scales really well, but just not as strong as she was in previous patches. Some other champions I've moved around, Kled got a little bit of a promotion. I feel like people are starting to figure out his build, his playstyle now, and I'd rate him pretty similar to a champion like Olaf, where some comps he's really good, some comps he's really useless, and he kind of has to rely on snowballing a lot more than other champions, which is why he's not really rated that highly. Moving on to our C tier. Now, a lot of these champions have the problem of being terrible blind picks. So like Yasuo, like Yone, like Vayne, just straight awful as blinds, or they're just very risky to pick. So a champion like Cho'Gath, if you blind pick him and the jungler doesn't like you or you versus a really hard counter pick, really hard to get through that unscathed. I actually think Cho'Gath mid is pretty OP. It's very easy to go even in mid lane compared to top, but top lane you're just going to get frozen on and ran down, so pretty difficult unless you get the freest matchup in the world, but even then there are going to be better counter picks than Cho. And some other champions like Shen, champs like Pantheon, if you don't really get an early lead, a lot of champions outscale you very, very quickly in lane and inside, so I don't really think they're worth the niche of their global ulti in high ranks, when a good top lane is going to communicate it strongly, and people are going to play around it a little bit better. One champ I do want to promote is Mordekaiser, but I'm not going to do it just yet. The reason I want to is because of the Hexplate build second item. He's a lot more threat than he had before. The reason I'm not going to, he's still very linear, still very easy to play against compared to other champions. So I'm going to keep him in there for now and try to get more data on him. Now for D tier, a lot of these champions are just so low carry potential, so low threat. Like Poppy, sure, if you pick it into Rakan, Lee Sin, you know, it's going to be great, but there's probably going to be a better champion anyway. You know, Ornn just so solid, but very, very, very team reliant. And then some champs are just unblind pickable, like Sit versus a really good range top player, like Kayle if it's a good player in good jungle. Really, really impossible. There's a big reason why in Korean solo queue, there's almost no KO 1 tricks that get past, you know, 200, 300 LP. You just get dove on repeat versus good junglers and good laners, way too hard to execute. And a lot of these champions kind of share that similarity, like Trundle, like Shyvana. You just can't really blind pick these champions, and even as counter picks in the perfect scenarios, there's almost always going to be a better champion than them. Moving on to our below Emerald tier list, and as you can see, completely different from the previous one, pretty much flipped upside down, but I'm going to be breaking down exactly why. But before we begin, one thing to note, left to right does matter for every category, so strongest to weakest, apart from S tier. S tier, they're all pretty much the same, just for different reasons, right? It doesn't really like, you know, them being one clear strongest champ in the game, so they're all pretty much the same, exact same as the high-low tier list as well. Now, the 3 metrics of what makes a champion good and below Emerald for any player, doesn't matter if they're Platinum or if they're Iron or Bronze, is ease of execution. Ease of execution is the top priority. How can you consistently win games on a champion? Knowing that and being able to execute it is really, really crucial, and the champion that has a low amount of variables is really important, really beneficial as well. Now, the second one, and that kind of ties into ease of execution, is stat checking power. So what I mean by that is a champion like Warwick or Set, if you feel like you're strong and you click onto your opponent, and you are stronger, you're probably going to win. Of course, if you execute it super terribly, maybe not, but if you use your abilities to a good level, if you have 50, 100 games on your champ, you're going to win in most cases, where a champion like Mbessa, or a Fiora, there's going to be a lot of cases where you could technically win that 1v1, but you got to be elegant, you got to have that finesse, you got to be kiting, you know, weaving around, playing around your cooldowns, you can't just click onto them and kill them, which is why a lot of players really struggle with these champions. One thing I like to say for Mbessa students is you're not playing Jax, you're playing Mbessa, because they're using their hops like a Jax Q, just jumping onto their opponent, and that's not going to get you far on a champ like Mbessa. So stat check power, the stat check power, really, really important. And the third one is side laning power. Being able to win a game through side in any game below Emerald is really, really important, because there's pretty much no resistance on the tier 2. If you win your lane and you're stronger than your opponent, it's very easy to consistently break tier 2 side towers, and that's just going to accelerate. You're going to have 3 items at 21, 22 minutes if you break both the tier 2s, and that's the easiest formula for winning games, where a champion, let's just say a champion like Vladimir, let's say you dominate your lane, you're not going to break tier 2s on Vladimir, there's no way. The side laning power is just way too low, so side lane power really important. So those are the top 3 metrics. Most of the champions that are in D or C tier, they either, you know, have bad on 2 or 3, you know, stat check power and side laning, or they're just way too hard. Now, S tier. So the reason these S tier champions are so good is they do tick all those metrics. They're not weighted equally, of course. Olaf is worse at side laning than Garen, but he's better at stat checking, so it all kind of balances out. And the biggest benefit of these 4 champions, the formula for winning games on them is very, very straightforward if you have good mastery on them. So definitely really great champions to play for anyone in below Emerald. Now A tier is similar, just a little bit harder. Mordekaiser are of course pretty skill shot reliant, so there's that element to it as well. And a lot of people struggle with the Mordekaiser, when to short trade, when to long trade. It's a lot less straightforward than a champion like Set, where you mainly only want long trades, or a champion like Darius only wants extendeds, a champion like Mundo only wants short trades. It's a very different on Mordekaiser. Sometimes you want to poke them down, sometimes you just want to beat them down with your passive, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. And of course the 2 skill shots as well. Now, Urgot, he's got that element of being a range champion, so you do have to have some level of spacing. It's not as important on Urgot as a champ like Kennen or Aurora, but still a skill that you're going to have to develop. So you can kind of see these champions are either a little bit more difficult, or they're just not as solid like Kayle. Really good formula for winning games. I'm a big fan of Kayle for below Emerald students. She has good carry potential, and the formula for winning is very, very clear, very copy-paste, but she is a weak blind pick. If you blind pick her, and you verse, someone that's decent on a Jax or an Aurelia, or a jungler that's pretty good, you're going to have a bad time, so that's why she's not quite as high as she could be. And other champions, Cho'Gath, his weakness is, early lane. You're not going to get punished in lower ranks, and you actually can side lane. You're pretty strong on this champion if you get ahead. So a lot of these champions in A tier have kind of different reasonings. The reason why Teemo is here, he's kind of the one variable, is just because, in my opinion, he's probably the easiest range champion in the game. And it's very, very strong blind pick. And if you look at all the champions above him, except maybe Cho'Gath, he shits on all of them. So he's just a really strong champion for that elo bracket as well. He's a good high elo champion too. So I actually think that champ's pretty underrated, but you didn't hear that from me. Now, for B tier. So a lot of these champions have really good ease of execution, like Yorick, Trundle, Tryndamere. Nasus, you know what you're going to do. You are going to eat towers in side lane. Their blind pick power and their stat check ability. I mean, there's some exceptions, like Trundle's great stat checker. Might not quite be as high as S tier. I think it's harder to snowball on these champions is a big thing. Compared to like a Garen or a Olaf, it's a lot easier to get kills in lane compared to like a Yorick or like a Tryndamere. Of course, if you're good at the champion, you can make them work, but I just feel like they have a lot less flexibility than the champions above them. They only really win through side, and they have a little bit tougher of a matchup spread. Now, the reason why a lot of these bruisers are in B tier, like Renekton, like Aatrox, like Wukong, even if you have good champ mastery on them, a hard skill to learn for a lower ranked player is pushing the pace of the game. Renekton, and let's just say in gold, you can win lane probably every game that you play in, but can you rock up to every dragon, every Artican, Herald, communicate to your team to be there early and, get in good positioning? That's a really hard skill to learn. Not a lot of players are bus drivers in lower ranks. What I mean by that is communicating to their team what they want to happen and, shaping their view of the game. It's a very unnatural skill, and these champs kind of suck in side lane too. They can get, pressure inside, they can get farm, but you're not breaking a tier 2 tower as Aatrox very often unless your opponent's, sleeping and not there, so they don't really have that as well, and they don't quite have as good a scaling as other champions also. Now, champs, the other 3, so Camille, Gwen, Fiora, and Abyss, actually, all 4 of them, they're just, the ease of execution just isn't there. I actually think, if you have really good mastery on them in those lower ranks, they have some of the highest carry potential, especially Fiora, Gwen, Camille. But the ease of execution is not quite there. Again, you have to be a little bit more elegant, you have to space, play around cooldowns, very low stat checking compared to the champions above them. So I just think that ease of execution holds them back a little bit. But again, if you have amazing, really high mastery on them, they're still very good champs because their carry potential is so high. Now for C tier, so you're probably going to get some ease of execution is the big limiter for a lot of these champions. Aurelia, Riv, and Jace. Your champs like Yone, they just have such a high skill ceiling that even high rank players barely scratch the surface all the time. So it's just a really hard champ for me to recommend for someone below Emerald, especially below Gold as well. These champs just have way too much time commitment needed, and if you are in below Emerald, especially below Gold, you have a lot of skills that you need to learn to get to to higher ranks. So trying to learn important skills, let's just say wave control, side laning, and learning Jace at the same time, that is way too big of an ask for anyone. And another factor for these champions, just carry potential and side laney power. You're not winning the game through side lane on Singed or on Gragas. Sion can kind of do it, but I still think his carry potential is way too low. And for D tier, really hard champions again to another level, like Cassante, like Rumble. You need to really, really min-max your lane. You have to be really on point with your trade patterns. These champs are just way too hard, especially for below Gold. And then some other champions that are here that aren't quite as hard, like Tahm Kench or like Shin. I just don't think they do anything. I don't think you're going to win through side. You're not that good in team fight. Like, yeah, you can make the argument Ignite Shin, get some kills in lane, Tahm Kench stat check in lane. you know, you can make that argument, but there's just champs that do it better. I can't think of a single team combo I'll ever see for a below Emerald student where Shen or Tahm Kench looks better than any champion in A or S tier. I don't really think that's going to happen. So that's why these champions are here. The easier champions are down there for that reason. And the more complicated champions like Cassiopeia, like Akali, of course, like Rumble are just there, Rengar as well, are just there because the ease of execution is just way too brutal. Alright everyone, that's it for now, and as usual, if you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments, I'll get back to you, and I'll see you all next time.